What is up, guys, and welcome back to another Jungian vlog. How you all doing? Hope you're doing well. But anyway, so the last entry, I was talking about MBTI, and specifically, I kind of delved into my own kind of furthering of MBTI as a theory in my own mind, right? It's like I mentioned, it's something that I think about a lot. It's one of my, it's definitely my favorite personality theory, right? Which is why I've talked about it to some degree. But this entry, I was thinking of doing kind of an extension to that, because last entry I kind of gave an introduction as to basically, the idea that you can think of MBTI, as kind of a way to highlight certain, you could say, personalities or personality types. Of course, right? It's MBTI. It's about personality types, but but in this entry, I wanted to kind of delve a bit deeper into that, because I was discussing about how there's essentially, you can look at it from this perspective, which is everyone has an extroverted and an introverted personality, let's say, right? And this kind of goes deeper than the typical understanding of extroversion, introversion, as merely being energized by being in amongst people versus kind of by yourself, right? That's great, as an entry level idea, but like, what I was discussing in the previous entry kind of went a bit deeper. So like, if you haven't watched the previous entry, then I would highly recommend you do that, because it's kind of a preamble to what I'm about to talk about in this entry, right? But yeah, so this entry is just kind of going a bit deeper into illustrating what, like, the utility of what I'm presenting as my own extension to, let's say, MBTI, right? And of course, I think I tend to be fairly careful when it comes to giving disclaimers in videos, but like, of course, these are just my own thoughts, right? I wouldn't say that I am a massive MBTI or Jungian psychology expert in those areas, right? I merely know the kind of framework of it, and I kind of run with that, in my own kind of harebrained way, if you will, right? And like, I try to integrate, all other areas of of interest for me in terms of ideas and like, and other principles that I've stumbled across, throughout my travels. So this is by no means a kind of like an official, treatment on MBTI or anything like that, and I don't want to be taken, I don't want it to be taken as such. It's just my own kind of interpretation, right? If anything, who knows, right? I don't, like, basically what I'm trying to say is, like, take this with a pinch of salt, what I'm about to say, right? It's not like, it's not official MBTI, theory. It's just my take on it, and so, yeah, I just want to make that clear going forwards. But anyway, so like I said, I broke MBTI down last week, as such, right? So like, usually you would look at it, as, the most basic kind of interpretation of MBTI is like, and as such, Jungian psychological types, right? Which is the kind of the platform from which MBTI sprung, right? You think of it as four dichotomies. Four dichotomies, yeah. You have extroversion, introversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, and judging, perceiving, right? That's like the MBTI that most people are familiar with. But then if you go a bit deeper, you go into like what I would call actual MBTI theory, where you start looking at the cognitive functions, right? And you can approach it that way, right? You can kind of like identify your own personality type. And last entry was, kind of a clarification in case anyone is kind of a bit, doubtful about what the types are. or they kind of want to, think a bit more deeply about what their personality type means. And hopefully last week's last entry helped you to clarify that, you were indeed right, or maybe you need to rethink, like things from an MBTI from, a Myers-Briggs perspective. But regardless, yeah, and that's how you would normally look at things. You have a type, and that type is made up of a stack of 4 cognitive functions, which is, which has a logic to it, right? And then like there are other types that have certain other things. Then there's stuff like socionics, right, which is actually very important to my own understanding of, of Myers-Briggs, right? But like the way that I kind of broke it down was I instead took, okay, each person has an extroverted and an introverted personality, right? And the interesting thing about that is that based on, Myers-Briggs theory, everyone has a potentially different extroverted personality and introverted personality compared to someone else, right? Of a different quadra, socionics quadra, or type, And the important thing about this, the reason why like Myers-Briggs is so important to me as a framework is because when you know this, right, when you recognize that, yes, I do have a way that I like to be in the outside world versus when I'm alone and in private and I'm with myself, the side of me that I don't show to other people, let's say, right, as readily, then you can kind of start to understand your own personality, your own kind of, pair, your own kind of extroverted, introverted personality kind of manifestations, and compare those with other people, maybe even the people in your life. And it can go a long way in kind of explaining why sometimes, you and other people in your life don't necessarily see eye to eye, and like you're trying to like understand why that is. And that's why I really believe in this theory and my own interpretation of it, right? So everyone has an extroverted and introverted personality, right? And as I was explaining in the previous entry, the extroverted personality is the personality that you wear on your sleeve, that you take out with you when you go out to meet people, when you go out to explore the world, when you're playing, right? Your extroverted personality is the personality that you use to play in most times, right? It's like the exploring, adventurous side of you, right? And you take that side of you, obviously, that playful side of you, and you take that out into the world, right? To meet with other people, etc., right? And then you have an introverted personality, which is the personality that you don't necessarily show to people straight away. If anything, you're a bit kind of hesitant to show it to other people, because it's the side of you that's more vulnerable. It's the side of you that kind of is more pure, right? It's like, you're not so adventurous. If anything, you're more conservative with your introverted personality. There's a side of you that's kind of more like, like vulnerable and pure and wants to just be itself, right? And this side, contrasting with your extroverted side, is more like what you would call your true self, right? There's a side of you that's kind of outgoing, and there's a side of you that's more introverted. And the introverted side is more what you would identify as as who you truly are on the inside, as it were, right? And as I was saying, like if we kind of look at it the way I've described it, like everyone potentially has a differing pair of extroverted, like their extroverted and introverted personalities are different potentially, right? It's not as simple as just, oh, I'm more introverted than you because I like, did I say introvert, right? Yeah, introverted because you like being around people and I don't, right? It's like, it goes a bit deeper than that, and like, hopefully, like I said, this will help to expound on like differences that may exist that you might kind of see between you and people in your life, right? So, yeah. So like, as to finish off this recap, like your extroverted personality is made up of 2 functions, right? And those are your extroverted functions. Then you have your introverted personality, right? Which is made up of your introverted function, right? So for instance, I am an INFP, right? which is in the delta quadrant in socionics, right? And it has the functions Fi, Ne, Si, and Te, right? Which means that my extroverted personality, which you can readily see in my videos, right, is Nete, right? And as such, that is ideas and, you know, frameworks and finding connections between various ideas and translating language to kind of build bridges between like people's interpretations and like and that kind of thing, right? You know, it's like a very quick translating and explorative mental type of, you know, so like my extroverted personality is I love just like exploring ideas and talking about ideas and like and doing quick like kind of like twirls, mental twirls where I'm like, oh shit, no, this is related to this. Oh, but what if we think about this from this angle, right? It's like that's how I'm extroverted. I love like just discussing and thinking. It's just it just happens, right? It's just like I love just like thinking of new ideas all the time and like, you know, that kind of thing, right? And how to like kind of structure those ideas in such a way that's coherent, and I can explain those to other people, and like, you know, I just love that, right? But then there's another side of me, right, which is the introverted side, which is like SIFI, right? And as such, like my inner world, like the person that I am behind closed doors when I'm away from people is like I just love to like feel good essentially, right? FISI, like I'm a deeply sensual person. Right, I love like kind of like pleasure, right? It's really the word I would use. Like I love pleasure and I love like peace and calm and just like feeling into myself, right? And feeling good and like and beholding beauty. Like I love beauty, right? You know, like I try to inject beauty into everything that I make, you know, artistically, you know. So like I'm a highly sensual person, which doesn't come out very often, because, you know, it's a side of me that's vulnerable. It's like I feel weird when I show other people, like, you know, like my you know like slightly kind of like yeah, like perverse, I guess you could call, like it's not, you know, obviously like I'm not into like, you know, really kind of like, you know, taboo stuff necessarily, but I do love sensuality, and sometimes that shit can be a bit weird. It's like ASMR, right? That's a really good example. Like I like ASMR because it's that. ASMR is FISI, right? It really appeals to people of the Delta Quadra because we have an introverted personality that's based on like kind of deep and like kind of like slow burning sensation, which is why people of our quadra like ASMR, for instance, right? But anyway, so I wanted to break this down further and kind of give, so I want to start by like taking the four quadrants, right? So like, again, we have the alphas, we have the betas, we have the gammas, and of course we have the deltas, which I belong to, right? And again, each one of these quadras has a different set of extroverted and introverted personalities, right? You know, going by the framework that I'm presenting here, right? Again, like I might as well give like an extension to my disclaimer. It's like, you know, this is my interpretation. This is my way of like, because the thing is, MBTI and as such, you know, the Jungian psychological types theory looks at the way that our cognition kind of like fractionates and kind of like fulfills certain functional roles, right? And you can kind of reduce those as Jung did and as MBTI kind of, you know, extends into the cognitive functions, right? You know, well, really it's it's the four, you know, functions of sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling. But then you can extrovert them or introvert them, right? And so like, you know, in the same way that like, you know, socionics, a nice thing about socionics, for instance, is that like in MBTI you have a stack of four functions, right? But in socionics it accounts for all of the functions, right? So like you would have an additional four functions that are the functions that don't necessarily belong to your MBTI type, right? So like they're not in your MBTI stack, but they're the other force functions that are still available to you. This is the thing, is like, you have a preference in the way that you like to perceive and interpret the world. However, you still have access to the ones that you don't use, or that aren't very well developed, right? You know, so like, for instance, like I can introvert my thinking, right? But it's like, it's not something that happens very often, right? I can extrovert my feeling, right? But it feels very weird to me, right? Mainly, you know, particularly because it's my dominant, like FI is my dominant function, right? And so like when I extrovert feeling, it feels kind of like cheap. It feels cheap to me, you know, because like FI is very deep and like slow burning and just like heavy, right? But like if I start kind of doing the FE thing, it's like, it feels like I'm cheapening myself, right, as it were. But I can do it, and that's the point, right? And so the way that I'm laying this out implies that you should take your extroverted functions and stick them together, and that's how your extroverted personality is going to show, right? But like, that's not necessarily the case. It's one way to look at it, and it does have a manifestation that's very, I would say, apparent. But like, you know, again, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because, you know, anyway, just thought I'd kind of give another, like, an extension to my explanation. But like, yeah, so we have 4 quadrants, and each of the quadrants has a differing extroverted and introverted personality pair from each other quadrant, right? So like, I want to present 2 basically general types that you can put these 4 quadrant in, that basically describes 2 fundamental differences in personality between people, right? And that is, firstly, the personality types that I would describe as sensual philosophical, right? That's number 1. This is incidentally the type that I belong to, right? But sensual philosophical. And the other one is bonding practical or pragmatic, right? So like, in another way of saying this is, there are some people who are a bit more like hippie-ish, I guess, like a bit more kind of head in the clouds, and then there are people who are more down to earth, right? So yeah, so you generally you have people who, you know, they're into spirituality, you know, like probably whoever's watching this, right? And like, they're into like weird like stuff, right? And it's like, it's like their interests are kind of a bit more out there. They're a bit more kind of otherworldly, right? You know, you have these people, then you have the people who are more down to earth, and like, you know, these people are kind of more like maybe street and like just like straight up, you know, and that kind of thing, right? So you have 2 general personalities, right? And these 2 general personality types kind of the 4 quadrants kind of fit into these, right? So the alphas and the gammas are your bonding, and I'll describe what each of these words mean, right? But like, your alphas and your gammas are your bonding practical types, aka these are the people who are more down to earth, right? And then the betas and the deltas are your more sensual philosophical types, right? The only difference between these, right, is that like, in one quadra, one side is extroverted and the other side is, and the other side is introverted, and for the other quadra it's flipped around, right? So for instance, you know, in like an alpha type has extrovert, the alpha type has extrovert bonding, right? So like, I described all of these quadrants like in the last entry, right? It's like, you know, the alpha types are very like, they love like playing with people and kind of like think like kind of just like really engaging in exploring, you know, like the human kind of perspective, right? You know, they love like kind of like playing around with lots of different types of characters and personalities, funny like personalities, and like angry personalities, and they just love like just like the color, like they like exploring like just many different human personalities, right? So they really like kind of like just relating with people in like, you know, just like a very dynamic way, right? You know, and conversely, they have an introverted practical side, right? So like I explained, they love to kind of like just work on their environment in such a way that kind of like gives them the most control over it, right? They love kind of just building on like something that's, you know, that's very kind of like, one thing maybe I didn't mention was like, or one kind of description I didn't give was like, but like they love like perfection. They love like kind of like really skillful, perfectionistic craftsmanship, right? They love like just like things that are just done right. There's so much intricacy and detail in it, right? They love like, you know, it's like things like collecting or craft, right? You know, things like this, right? But for the gamma quadra, like these are reversed, right? So like they have extraverted pragmatism, right? So like by pragmatism and practicality, I mean like you could call it materialism, right? It's like the gammas love like just like fucking trying new shit and like owning new shit and doing new shit, right? You know, they just love like exploring the world, right? And exploring what's possible in the world, right? And conversely, the side that's introverted for them is the bonding side, right? So like I said I would explain these, right? Bonding means that you view it's like a few other words I can give for it is friendly and familial, right? You know, because people who are down to earth, they tend to be more friendly, right? You know, the way that they kind of express their kind of like more tender side is like they tend to like joking around with people and being friendly with people and bantering with people, that kind of thing, right? You know, that's how they relate with people, right? And that's how they generally view the world, right? Is like when like their thoughts are very humanistic, right? Which lends to their down to earth nature, right? So like bonding is, you know, the connection between intuition and feeling, really, right? You know, it's a combination of intuition and feeling that gives people who are more down to earth a more like, it's like they view everything through a humanistic lens, right? They tend to think of things as a human being, right? Whereas someone who is more philosophical, which is the combination between intuition and thinking, which is, you know, something I belong to, it's like we tend to be more mechanical in the way that we think of existence, right? We think of existence as more of like a collection of patterns, right? And human being is only one of these patterns, right? So like sometimes the way that we think and the way that we kind of interpret why things are and things like that is not so much from a human perspective. It's more from a mechanical philosophical perspective, right? So that's one kind of comparison we can draw here, is like the you have like the types that are more friendly, that view the world more from a humanistic lens and therefore focus more on bonds, which is hence bonding, right? It's like bonds between people, versus people who are like kind of more like philosophical. They view the world more from like a mechanical, pattern-based lens, right? Not so much from like, oh, like I'm John and this is what I think of the world. It's like, no, John is a pattern that arose from, you know, the matrix of patterns that makes up our reality, right? You know, so that's that, right? So then we move on to the sensing, the sensing pair, right? You have your sensuals, like I was explaining myself, right? It's like, and the, you know, as a delta, my sensuality is more introverted, right? You know, like I love, like I really like being by myself, or like kind of going through an experience where like I'm kind of like in a cocoon almost, right? You know, like I'm in like a womb, like when I feel just like every inch of my body, like, and like the waves of pleasure kind of take me. You know, like I love beauty, like I love just like like I mentioned, right, I've been on Pinterest a lot recently, and I have a couple boards where I just find art that like makes me feel great. That's like beautiful and like mysterious and deep. It's not necessarily very detailed, right? Although like a lot of the art that nowadays is very detailed, like, you know, because hey man, we live in a technological age, can't be making shitty art, right? But like for me, the more important thing, like as I'm doing something like exploring art, is that like it has to make me feel something, right? It has to kind of like just like make my hair stand on end, give me goosebumps, or like just give me like a like type of a feeling, right? You know, so like in my alone time, that's what I do basically. Like I think I try to like kind of build a lifestyle where like I can kind of be in a cocoon when I'm by myself and just like drink in like the slow burning kind of like sensuality of like art and pleasure and stuff like that. Right. I'm the type of dude who would probably love like scented candles and like a massage, you know, that kind of thing. Like I would really love that. Like I'm really into that kind of thing. Like I love beauty, I love art, I love sensuality, right? That's who I am on the inside, right? And that's the side I don't usually show to people, right? But I'm working to try and, you know, obviously bring it out, because like the thing is, like, your introverted personality, it's very easy for that side of you to kind of get steamrolled, right? You rely on your extroverted personality to kind of like traverse the world, right? That's the side of you that's stronger, right? Your extroverted personality is the stronger side of you, right? So like you tend to lead with that side. But the thing is, you have a side of you that's more vulnerable, that like usually gets steamrolled because like you're afraid that it's too weird or too weak, right? You know, for instance, like, you know, that's why like I have like a bit of resting bitch face when I'm out in public, and I kind of like my movements are very kind of guarded sometimes, and that's because like it's like I feel that if I'm too like, you know, flamboyant, right, and stuff like that, like people pick on me, people think I'm weird, you know, that kind of thing, right? So like the side of you that's introverted, like you tend to hide from the world because it's vulnerable, right? But you have to tap into it because it's the side of you that like leads to your healing, essentially, right? It's the side of you that you view as like your kind of innermost true self, right? So anyway, so yeah, so sensuality or sensual, like the sensual people, your betas and your deltas, they have SF. That's the combination of those two, sensing and feeling, that lead to like a sensual kind of interaction with the world, right? And then have I explained all of them yet? I think I might have. Yeah, well, and then your practical is your ST, right? So like, you know, ST, your alphas and your gammas, right? So like, yeah. So again, the difference between like one quadrant and the other quadrant based on like in that one thing. So like, for instance, for the sensual philosophicals, you know, betas and deltas, the betas have extroverted sensuality, right? So like their sensuality is very like outgoing and like and explorative and quick and loud and expressive, right? But like for the deltas, your sensuality is more kind of introverted, more pure, more slow, you know, deeper, as opposed to broader, right? Which you may have heard in like when describing the difference between extroverted functions and introverted functions within MBTI, right? That's actually part of theory, right? You know, it's not my own interpretation, but like, yeah. And then and similarly, like, you know, like as a delta, my kind of philosophical side is very like, you know, I need to know more ideas and new ways of framing and thinking about things. You know, I love like just traversing many different philosophies, ideologies, and perspectives, right? Whereas like the betas, like they have more of a centralized idea of how they think the world should be, right? You know, they, like I said, they have some kind of central message. They have some kind of central crusade that they're doing, right? And that's the thing that they guard, right? So, okay. So I hope that's clear to you, right? You know, so to summarize, there's two, broadly speaking, different types of personality, right? You have the people who are more like kind of head in the clouds and like hippie-ish, more like fairy-like, right? You know, your sensual philosophicals, right? And these are your betas and deltas, generally speaking. Again, other types can access this type of thing, right? You know, it's not as if like, you know, you're a delta, like, you know, you're a gamma type, and you can't be sensual. No, you can, but it's just like, generally speaking, this is how you prefer to meet with the world, right? You know, as a sensual philosophical, I like to meet the world physically in a sensual way, right? So I'm less about like effectiveness and effectiveness and pragmatism than I am about like kind of sensuality and beauty, right? And you know, conversely, you know, as a bonding type, you like to think of when you kind of like think in terms of how things should be, when you think about who you are, you tend to think of it from a more humanistic perspective, right? So you like to think about who you are as a person, who other people are, right? What they mean to you, right? You know, like you like personification. Like bonding types, they love personification. It's like they love taking something and giving it like a human spirit, right? Which is why they love stories like about like a cute little anthropomorphic animal that has like a human soul. It's like, oh, like what do they go through? What adventures do they have with their friends? Like that kind of thing, right? You know, because they view the world from a humanistic lens, and that's how they prefer to do it, right? Philosophical types, they think of the world like in terms of a more philosophical and mechanical and pattern based. You could even say, I would say scientific, but it's more philosophical. That's the more accurate term, right? You think of the world in terms of like structure as opposed to like a humanistic, like, you know, hey, like I'm a person, how do I feel, you know, that kind of thing, right? So anyway, so hopefully right there you can see like if you have differences with people in your life, where that might be. Are you a more down-to-earth person, or are you more of like a head in the clouds, like hippie type person, right? You know, like you know, artistic, and you know, as opposed to like more like kind of pragmatic, right? You know. And yeah, hopefully that kind of brings that awareness to you, right? So that's basically what I wanted to express in this section. But there are a few kind of other things that I could touch upon, right? So like, really, it's to do with when you meet up against people of different types, right? Because that's always the challenge, and that's always the thing that, you know, to me at least, is interesting about different personalities and the theory as a whole, right? And like what personality differences. But so the thing is, you know, and the thing is also that like you won't always stick with your tribe, right? The thing is that like it's important to find your tribe. But like part of the reason, a very big reason, that you learn things like this, or you listen to someone regurgitate it to you and you know, kind of lay it out for you, is like so that you can find people who resonate with you, essentially, right? Because when you find people who are the same type of personality that you have, then like communication becomes very easy, you know. And as such, yeah, you know, communication becomes very easy, right? But the thing is, like, you know, you won't always, you won't always like. You won't always be with people who are like you, and plus it's not always healthy to always be with people who are like you, right? You know, you have to dedicate, you know, like a portion of your life to kind of going outside of your comfort zone, let's say, right? And meeting with other people, because the thing is, like, you know, we need all of these different types of personality so that like our society continues to flourish, right? Our human societies continue to kind of innovate and proceed, right? You know, you need your pragmatic types to do shit, whilst the sensual types are all like kind of like, you know, like lighting incense and like and getting massages and like pleasuring themselves, right? You know, otherwise nothing would get done. And you need like the philosophical types, you know, the sensual types who are philosophical types, right? To like think about how things should be, right? Because sometimes you have to think in terms of you have to detach a bit from the human perspective, because otherwise, like, you kind of sometimes get bogged down by pettiness, and it's like people get stuck in patterns, and it's like you, as a more clear thinking, detached, you know, kind of a thinker from a higher perspective, like you can kind of like just like you can do something that can help that, right? Otherwise, people get stuck in these patterns, right? It's like, you know, people get into beefs, and like people fall in love with the wrong people, you know, that kind of thing, right? So like you have the perspective to be able to like kind of break patterns like that, and move people to move society and people in a more healthy direction, right? You know about things like ideological possession and tribalism, right? Whereas someone who is more down to earth may not think about things from that perspective, from that kind of an angle, right? But anyway, so okay, so from the top of my head, like there's one difference, which is like the difference between someone who has an extroverted, say like, you know, I'm a delta and I'm talking to a beta type, right? It's like, well, you can even assign this to just individual functions, not necessarily personality types, right? Introverted, extroverted, like, you know, the thing is, you know, and I've already kind of discussed this, I think, but the thing is that the side of you that's more introverted, like I said, is more pure and vulnerable and slow and easily overwhelmed, right? And so like that, so like, you know, you'll probably usually run up in situations where like, say like, you know, I'm in like a loud environment, or I'm playing some sport, or like, you know, I'm on the street, right? It's like I'm always nervous because like I feel really overwhelmed, right? Because I'm like, I just want to relax and enjoy myself and look at beautiful things, and then like there are people like shouting and playing around and stuff, right? It's like when I see people playing around physically, I take it like a threat, right? You know, because like I'm interpreting it as a delta type, right? You know, or rather like, you know, it's like that's the side of me that's weak, right? You know, like I'd rather be in a safe environment when I'm in, and everyone's kind of like just like in like having a sensual experience. But when people are like playing around and like rough housing, is like I get really like, I feel threatened basically, right? So like the introverted side of you is more like it's like, for instance, like if I was if I was kind of if I was, you know, if I was talking this way to like a down to earth type, like, so even an alpha or a gamma, like alphas are a bit better because they have any, right? They have any SI, same as deltas, right? So like they can handle a degree of like kind of quick conversation, like dynamic conversation. But like gamma types, for instance, you know, your ISFPs and like NTJs and stuff like that, right? They're like that's the side of them that's introverted, right? So like if I started like kind of saying a bunch of shit, like a gamma type might get like offended and feel threatened, right? Because it's like whoa, like to them it's like, you know, I'm just me, you know, like what the fuck are you talking about, you know? It's like it's like, it's hard for me to describe because I'm not a gamma type, but like that would be the response, is like they feel threatened by you kind of like pouring all of this, like, you know, oh yeah, you know what, human beings are just a pattern, blah, 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 you know, this is the meaning of existence, you know, this is Myers-Briggs type indicator theory, and they're like, whoa, you know, if anything, you know, yeah, they feel threatened, you know. So like, you know, the extroverted side that you have, like, you know, you eventually know like when it threatens people, because it does threaten some people, right? So there's this side of like, so like, you know, I don't usually in society talk so openly about these things, because I know that like if I get a bit too out of hand, right? Because if I get started, like in these videos, you can tell like I just keep going about like ideas, and then oh, what about this, and people who aren't delta types basically, right? Like they start kind of like you know, it's like it freaks them out, right? And they kind of like don't know what to say, right? And you can tell that it's making them uncomfortable, and it gets awkward, right? So like you learn that like you have to be careful, you know, when like using your extroverted side, because that side of you is the side that's like really kind of intense, right? And like it causes people who have like you know, other people of different types to kind of like shrink away and feel threatened, right? But the thing is that like you need to have an outlet for that, right? Because the thing is like, you know, obviously like you learn to kind of hold that side of you back, but eventually like it's like you get frustrated, right? It's like when people get like too like for instance, if people get too kind of like self-absorbed, like, you know, gamma types basically, right? They get too self-absorbed, like it kind of like it kind of irritates me. So this is NI basically. When I'm facing NI, and NI is a very kind of like self like focused function, right? It's like, it's kind of like very like, you know, like I'm who I am, right? And like, and I see what I see, right? And it's like when you're giving lots of, you know, and it's like when you hear someone NI talking and you're an NE user, it's like you're like right? It's just like there's like a frustration. It's like, okay, and right, you know, it's like probably like when I'm like doing my thing, and then like maybe again gamma types, right? You know, like they might see me. It's like they might be like, what the fuck, right? You know, like it's like gamma types watching, or like even beta types, right? You know, watching, even though like beta types is sensual, right? But, like this is a thing. It's like betas and deltas are both sensual philosophical types, right? But like if a beta were to watch me, like or watch MBTI, right? Not MBTI, sorry, ASMR, like there would be a bit of them that's kind of like right? It's like an impatience almost. It's like a, come on, get on with it, like kind of a thing, right? So like your extroverted function when met with someone who has an introverted version of what you have, right? Like it's like a, okay, come on, right? You know, it's like an impatient frustration that you have, right? And it's just like it weirds you out, right? When something's introverted, right? You know, so for instance, like, you know, when like either alpha or beta types, right? You know, who are both introverted thinkers, like they're talking about their theories. I'm like kind of like, okay, you know, like we get the point, right? Because I'm a TEFI user, right? So like I have TE, so like I'm like, what's the point? Like, what's the point? Because then we can get to the next point, right? You know, like let's just share as much information as possible. And they're like, no, we have to really get this right. And I'm like, and that's how TE users feel towards TI users. It's like TI users feel like TE users are like just like threatening their own kind of integrity of thought. So TI users like, wait, shut the fuck up, right? Like just like, hold on, you know, you're going too fast for me, right? You know, you're jumping too many boats, right? Whereas like the TE user is like, come on, and, you know, like we get it, you know, I get the idea. You know, there's, you know, let's keep going, right? So, you know, and like to give another illustration, like yeah, like, you know, to give the opposite, right? FI, right? So introverted feeling, it's like, you know, I love like just like really feeling, I like kind of like really going deep into feelings, right? And kind of like really feeling them and seeing what I can find from them, right? And, you know, an FE user would be like, you know, like trying to like kind of make me joke around and not take myself so seriously, right? And as I continue to take myself seriously, as FI DOMs do, it's like, or as FI users do, it's like, the FE users like lighten up, man, you know, fucking, you know, let me slap you or something, so that you react and you're like, why are you being so hard on me? You know, you don't know how I feel. I just want to, you know, like, why are you being so loud? And it's like, you know, because like as an FI user, you want to really just like delve into the feelings, and your feelings are deep and personal, right? And then someone is like, this person is stuck up their own ass. Let me slap them and, you know, and make them laugh and like take the piss out of them, and, you know, because it's like, come on, man, come on, let's have fun, you know. So that's another example. You know, yeah, that's so like that's the dynamic, right? It's like you might be, you know, you might have one person, you might have two people that are down to earth, right? But one of them is an alpha and the other one's a gamma, right? And like, even though they share the same thing, they share the same personality type, like one, they have like contradicting or opposite extrovert introvert personality personalities, right? So anyway, so yeah, really, as I said, I wanted to kind of extend on what I talked about last time, because I think that this is important, right? You know, I think that it's important to know what you want, right, as a person, and what other people in your life want, you know, and if those are aligned, right? Because like I said, you're gonna realize that like the people that are in your life are different from you, and that's why like you get into like it's just like you feel like you can't see eye to eye, they don't understand you and you don't understand them, and that's because of your differences, right? And like, of course, in response to this, you want to look for people who will understand you, right? Who do have the same personality type as you, right? So that you feel at home, you feel seen, right? That's super important. Like, I don't care who you are, that's super important, right? You should have that in your life, right? However, there are still the people in your life, and there are still people in this world who don't share the same way of looking at the world as you do, right? So like, what taking something like MBTI and kind of looking at it in this way does is that it allows you to like consciously, you know, arrange your relationships and your life to seek out people who, if you don't have them, because odds are you probably don't, because like, hey, most people are born into a situation and like it's like there's massive mismatches and they never like get far enough to understand what those mismatches are, so that they can actually find people who resonate with them, right? Who think the same way that they do, right? So if you don't have that, then like you need to identify who you are, right? And you can do that with things like MBTI, and you can seek out people who see the world like you do. It's hella important, because like it's like a resting ground, right? Because like you can't be misunderstood your whole life. You can't feel like, oh, like, you know, people like the people in my life frustrate me, or they shut me out, and I feel like really vulnerable, and like I can't be my real self, right? You know, the extrovert side of you is like, you know, these people like are so, it's like they don't see the same things that I do, right? That's what your extroverted side says when it has a mismatch with other people, because you're like, oh, they come on, like they just don't see the value that I see, right? You know, they just like, they're boring, you know, they don't do enough in this area that I see like a lot of progression in, right? Because your extroverted side wants to like keep growing and expanding and playing, right? The thing is, like, you know, when you're with people who are mismatched with you, like your extroverted side, like it's like you want to play in that way. Well, I want to kind of like just like say some random shit and discuss weird shit with people, but like maybe some of the people, like maybe like some people in my life, like, you know, or have been in my life, like they just, that's not the way that they play. So when I say stuff that's too outlandish, right, when I'm too facetious, which is something I love to be, right, like it's like it scares some people away. They're like, right, and then like I have to force myself to like, you know, to not be so facetious, right? But it's how I express myself, right? I'm not only facetious, right? But like occasionally I'm facetious, because I love like wordplay and like, you know, going from idea to idea like an idiot, like a lunatic, right? But like some, you know, but if people in your life don't do it that way, you know, if they're more like physically playful and you're like sensual, and you're like when people are like throwing things at you, or like making fun of you like in a physical way, you're like, you take it as a threat, but for them it's play, right? So like that's the reason why you need to find people who play like you, so that you can play with someone, right? If everyone in your life is like, they don't play the same way you do, like you're just gonna be like resentful and like, oh, right? You know. But anyway, and the introverted side is like, you know, is the side that like, you know, because like if you find people who play like you, they will probably like also be like you, right? So their introverted sides will be like you. You know, if the people who are more down to earth find down to earth people, they'll find, because they want to bond, right? They want other people who they can share experiences with, they can joke around with, they can feel like they're family with, right? So like the people who play physically, like they'll also be more like kind of down to earth and friendly, right? Versus people like myself, who like are more central philosophical. Like, you know, if I can find people who can banter with me, like, well, banter, I mean, like, they can kind of like go to that level where like, you know, we talk about like, you know, astrological charts, even though I'm not really into astrology at all. Like, you know, or like the meaning of it is, well, just like wisdom. I like people who speak wisdom. Nowadays, it's more wisdom for me. Like, there used to be a time when, and like I haven't been making as much entries recently, but like there used to be a time when like I was more kind of just like, yeah, ideas, and then, but now I'm like, I like wisdom, right? And like people who I can discuss wisdom with, that's great, right? And like those people would also probably tend to be like quite eccentric like me, you know, and they like weird arts and like weird like physical experiences, you know, and that's what I'm into, right? However, like I said, you know, once you have that and once you understand that, you can also then like make up for the differences between you and other people, right? Which will be amazing. Okay, so anyway, I'm starting to run out of juice, but like, yeah, just thought that I would make an extension for my previous entry. But anyway, I hope that was helpful. I don't know if I've forgotten anything. I don't think so. I hope my message is clear enough. It's like, again, take everything I said with a grain of salt. You know, it's not necessarily a good interpretation of MBTI. You know, I can't guarantee. Well, that's the thing. I really do believe that this is going to be helpful, right? But at the same time, I can't guarantee that like that it'll work for you, right? Because again, like everyone's different, and you know, this is only one way of looking at the theory and also of looking at life, right? And how you should approach relationships, you know, things like that. But yeah, but nonetheless, I hope that it gave you some insight. So that if you had any problems prior to this, and you're like, yeah, you know, I don't get along with people, then you have something to work with now. And then like I said, really it's Jungian psychological types. Like I have not found another theory that has been so like just like deep into like the into like, yeah, like kind of personality really. But anyway. Cool. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you got something out of that. If you have any comments, leave them in the comment section below. And yeah, hopefully I'll be back soon. And yeah, I'll catch you then. So until then, keep going on whatever you're doing, and I'll catch you next time. Peace out.